For thousands of years, people around the world have looked to the skies and wondered if we are alone. Strange carvings, ancient texts, and modern encounters all tell a story that refuses to go away. Aliens, or extraterrestrial beings, are thought to be life forms that come from beyond Earth, intelligent civilizations with technology far more advanced than ours. Some believe they visit us in flying craft, others say they've shaped our history from the shadows, and many eyewitnesses claim direct encounters that changed their lives forever. Whether you see them as visitors, watchers, or something more mysterious, the idea of aliens forces us to ask one of humanity's oldest questions: are we truly alone in the universe, or are we already being watched? A question buried in time. Imagine sitting outside on a quiet evening, the sky stretched endlessly above you, stars twinkling like cold, timeless jewels. For most of us, that sky is comforting, a backdrop of beauty. But for civilizations before us, it was far more than just scenery. It was a mystery, a riddle, and sometimes a warning. Tonight we open a door to that mystery, a door to the question: did aliens visit Earth more than 1,300 years ago? This is not just a question of science fiction. Across forgotten ruins, ancient manuscripts, and oral traditions passed down for centuries, strange clues appear. Clues that suggest humanity may have encountered something, or someone, not of this world. The forgotten timeline. Let us first set the stage. The year is roughly 700 AD. In the United States today, our minds might first leap to images of medieval castles in Europe or samurai in Japan. But at that time, much of North America was alive with thriving native cultures, the ancestors of today's Native American tribes. Cities were growing in Central and South America, with the Maya civilization at its height. Across the world, powerful empires rose and fell, from the Tang dynasty in China to the expanding Islamic Caliphate in the Middle East. But beneath the surface of human history, hidden between the dates, the kings, and the battles, lie the stories that don't quite fit. Stories of lights in the skies, beings who appeared suddenly only to vanish just as quickly, and monuments that defy explanation even now. Strange lights in the heavens. Let's begin with one of the earliest documented mysteries: sky sightings. 708 AD, Chinese court records describe a pearl of fire hovering in the night sky for hours before splitting into several smaller lights that scattered across the horizon. The scribes called it a heavenly omen, but modern readers see something far more provocative, an object behaving in ways no meteor or comet could. And in North America, oral traditions from tribes like the Hopi and Zuni describe visitors from the stars, beings who arrived in glowing sky shields. These accounts were told long before airplanes, rockets, or satellites. Could these be descriptions of spacecraft, recorded in the language available at the time? The Maya connection, the Maya civilization, flourishing in Central America during this period, gives us even stranger puzzles. Their temples, aligned with incredible astronomical precision, suggest a relationship with the stars that went beyond mere curiosity. Inscriptions at Copan and Palenque speak of gods descending from the sky, often portrayed not as formless spirits, but as figures wearing elaborate gear. The sarcophagus lid of King Pakal, carved around 683 AD, is one of the most hotly debated artifacts. To some, it depicts the king at the controls of what looks eerily like a spacecraft, his hands gripping levers, his feet pressed against pedals, fire shooting out beneath him. Mainstream archaeologists dismiss this as symbolism, nothing more than a stylized journey to the underworld. But if we step outside the traditional explanations, the image begins to look uncomfortably technological. The mystery of the Nazca travel further south to the dry deserts of Peru, and the ground itself becomes a canvas of riddles. The Nazca, Lines, stretching for miles, form giant shapes of animals and geometric designs only fully visible from the air. By 700 AD, the Nazca culture had already been creating these lines for centuries. But why? From the ground, the figures are nearly invisible. From above, they are unmistakable. Who were they signaling to? Were the lines ritualistic, meant to call upon sky gods, or were they literal landing markers for something descending from the heavens, a shocking European chronicle? Now, let's travel to Europe. Around the year 776 AD, in the skies over the Saxon fortress of Sigeberg, present-day Germany, chronicles describe flaming shields floating over the church as Christian soldiers defended against a Saxon attack. The sight of these objects terrified the Saxons who fled. The chroniclers described the shields as round, metallic, and moving against the wind, centuries before the invention of anything resembling flight. Were these simply hallucinations born of battle stress? Or was something or someone intervening in human conflict from the skies? Sleepless questions. Here is where the unease begins. Across cultures, across continents, the year 700 to 800 AD holds a pattern of sightings and encounters, glowing. Discs, fire pearls, heavenly shields, star beings. How is it that civilizations separated by oceans with no contact tell stories so strangely similar? If they were all hallucinations, why do they describe such consistent imagery? If they were all natural phenomena, why did people describe them with such metallic, controlled, deliberate qualities? It raises a chilling possibility. What if our ancestors did not just dream of the stars? They saw visitors from them, the builders. Among us, one of the most haunting aspects of ancient alien theories is the suggestion that some of Earth's most mysterious monuments were not only inspired by extraterrestrial encounters, but possibly constructed with their help. Take the great earthen mounds scattered across North America, many of which date back thousands of years, but were still in active use around 700 AD. The Cahokia Mounds in Illinois, for example, form a vast complex larger than many medieval European cities. Their precise alignments with solar and lunar cycles hint at astronomical knowledge well beyond what we would expect. And in the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, built structures aligned with solstices and equinoxes, such as the Sun Dagger site at Fajardo Butte, where shafts of light carve precise patterns onto spirals at key celestial moments. Did ancient builders learn these techniques solely from observation? Or were they taught, perhaps by beings who came from the very skies they worshipped? Echoes in myths are more than stories. They are encoded memories, passed down like whispers through time. Around 1300 years ago, cultures across the world told myths of star beings. The Dogon people of West Africa spoke of visitors from the star Sirius, beings who descended in a whirlwind of light. Strangely, their traditions describe Sirius as a binary star system, something modern science only confirmed in the 20th century. In the Americas, the Zuni spoke of the Ashkoya, shining ones who came from the heavens to teach their ancestors. The Hopi spoke of the Ant people, who helped humanity survive great catastrophes underground. Are these mere allegories, or are they cultural memories of encounters with non-human intelligences? The sleepless thought. Here is the question that unsettles the mind. If extraterrestrials did visit Earth 1300 years ago, what did they want? Were they observers, watching as human civilizations blossomed across the globe? Were they teachers, offering fragments of knowledge to guide our progress? Or were they manipulators, subtly shaping our history for purposes we cannot begin to fathom? And if they came then, where are they now? Did they leave? Or are they still here, hidden, waiting, watching? The whispers of forgotten civilizations. When we peer into the distant past, we often expect to see only shadows, ruins, bones, fragments of pottery. Yet, sometimes, those shadows speak. They whisper stories of impossible technology, of beings from the skies, and of a kind of knowledge that should not have existed in the 7th or 8th centuries. In this chapter, we follow those whispers, from ancient India to medieval Europe, from the Middle East to the deep jungles of Central America. Together, they form a pattern that refuses to stay buried. The flying chariots of India far across the seas, in the land we now call India, ancient texts speak of flying machines known as vimanas. These accounts go back thousands of years, but their echoes reached well into the timeline we are exploring, around 700 AD. The Samarangana Sutradhara, a Sanskrit treatise written in the 11th century, but drawing upon much older traditions, describes vimanas in technical detail, machines of metal powered by mysterious engines, capable of moving in every direction and even traveling into the heavens. One passage describes how they move like a bird, powered by mercury, and were used to travel great distances. Another describes weapons of terrifying power, beams of light that could level entire cities. What is chilling is how much these descriptions resemble modern technology. Could these simply be myths, exaggerated by poets, or were they cultural? Memories of encounters with extraterrestrial craft, written down long after the fact. If aliens did visit Earth 1300 years ago, could vimanas have been their vehicles, machines so advanced that our ancestors could only describe them in the language of gods and magic? A medieval battle in the sky jump forward to Nuremberg, Germany in 1561. Not quite 1300 years ago, but close enough to remind us that such sightings did not end with the ancients. Residents awoke to a terrifying spectacle, dozens of cylindrical and spherical objects flying over the city. Eyewitnesses described them as globes of fire, some black, some bright, engaging in what looked like an aerial battle. The sky, they said, seemed to be at war with itself. What's striking is not just the report itself, but the artwork that survives. A woodcut illustration shows strange objects, discs and rods, clashing in the sky, shapes that look eerily like modern UFO reports. Now imagine this. If such battles were being witnessed in the 1500s, is it not possible that similar confrontations happened even earlier, back in the 700s or 800s, when fewer records survived? What if the skies above Earth have always been a theater of unseen conflict, battles fought not by humans, but by visitors we can barely comprehend? The Abbasid anomaly in the Middle East, the Abbasid Caliphate was rising around 750 AD. Their scholars preserved knowledge from Greece, Persia, and India, but they also recorded something stranger. Some chronicles mention stars that move as men command and shining domes that appeared above Baghdad. At the time, these were interpreted as omens. But what if they were something more? Even more startling are reports of a wandering star that descended low enough for shepherds to describe its metallic surface. One account claims that the object remained hovering for nearly an hour before shooting skyward with blinding speed. This was not a meteor. Meteors do not hover. They do not shine like polished bronze. The Codex of Contact in Central America, the Maya kept codices, books made of bark paper painted with glyphs. Most were destroyed during the Spanish conquest, but a handful survived. Among them are depictions of beings who do not look entirely human. Long heads, large almond-shaped eyes, figures emerging from what appear to be circular pods. To us today, they resemble the archetypal grey alien. To the Maya, they were gods from the stars, beings who guided them in mathematics, astronomy, and agriculture. The Maya calendar itself, so precise it could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance, raises questions. Was it the product of careful observation, or knowledge given by someone who already knew the cycles of the heavens? The Oera Linda mystery. Let us move north, to the Frisian people of what is now the Netherlands. Around the 13th century, A manuscript, known as the Ora Linda book, appeared, claiming to be much older. Scholars debate its authenticity, but its content is chilling. It describes beings from the sky who shone like glass and machines that thundered as they moved. Some passages even describe a great flood caused by starships that disrupted the balance of Earth's waters. If the Ura Linda text is genuine, even partially, it suggests that European peoples too carried memories of extraterrestrial contact woven into their myths, the monks of the sky, fire. One of the strangest accounts comes from an Irish monastery around the year 740 AD. Monks recorded seeing ships in the air during evening prayers. According to the record, one such ship actually lowered an anchor down to earth, snagging on the doorway of the church. A figure, described as humanoid, climbed down the rope as if swimming in air. The monks rushed forward, but the being appeared unable to breathe in Earth's atmosphere. After struggling for several moments, it fled back up the rope and into the ship, which disappeared into the clouds. It is a bizarre account, almost absurd, yet it has been cited again and again in UFO studies as an early description of extraterrestrial visitors interacting with humans. What makes it so sleeplessly disturbing is its mundanity. The monks did not describe gods, demons, or visions. They described a ship, an anchor, a rope, a being, technology, the patterns in the stars. So why do all these cultures, so far apart, so different in language and belief, describe such similar encounters? We see patterns, discs, domes, shields hovering in the sky, beings descending in light, sometimes struggling in our atmosphere. Knowledge transferred, astronomy, calendars, agriculture, architecture, weapons of light and fire, like the Vimanas or the fiery battles in the sky. If all of this were invention, why would the same motifs appear in China, India, Europe, and the Americas, all within a span of a few centuries? The unsettling answer is that these are not independent myths. They may be fragments of a shared, real experience, encounters with visitors from elsewhere, retold in the only way ancient humans knew how. A sleepless possibility. Now comes the thought that may keep you awake tonight. What if Earth is not a random planet in the galaxy, quietly developing its own civilizations? What if, instead, Earth has been under observation for millennia, watched, visited, even shaped by intelligences far beyond our understanding? And what if 1,300 years ago was not their first visit, nor their last? When you look up tonight at the stars above your backyard, remember those same stars looked down on the Maya, the Saxons, the Abbasid scholars, the Irish monks. They too saw strange lights in the skies. The difference is that back then, the visitors did not hide. They descended. They showed themselves. They left memories so powerful they survived in myths, manuscripts, and monuments. And if they did it once, they could do it again. The American connection. When we talk about aliens visiting Earth 1,300 years ago, our minds often travel to faraway lands, Mayan temples, Egyptian pyramids, Asian dynasties. But what if the truth lies much closer to home? What if the landscapes of North America hold their own mysterious evidence of contact, evidence written into earthworks, stones, and the oral traditions of native peoples? Tonight, we turn our eyes to America, to sights and stories that continue to unsettle archaeologists and inspire sleepless nights for anyone willing to listen. The mystery of Cahokia. Long before Columbus, long before the United States was born, there was Cahokia, a vast city along the Mississippi River near present-day St. Louis, Illinois. Around the year 1050 AD, Cahokia reached its height. Tens of thousands lived there, building enormous mounds of earth, the largest of which, Monk's Mound, is bigger at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. But here's the riddle. Cahokia was not just big, it was astronomically aligned. At A site now called Woodhenge. Wooden posts were arranged in circles that tracked the solstices and equinoxes with precision. At dawn on the summer solstice, the sun would rise directly over Monk's Mound, as if the city had been built as a kind of cosmic observatory. How did they achieve this precision with no telescopes, no modern instruments? And more importantly, why did they design their city in this way? Some archaeologists say it was religion, but others point to a darker, stranger idea. What if Cahokia's builders were guided by beings from the stars, beings who gave them the knowledge of the heavens? The ancestral Puebloans and the sun dagger travel west to what is now New Mexico, to the homeland of the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi. Here lies Fajada Butte, a rocky outcrop in Chaco Canyon. Atop this butte is the Sun Dagger, a formation of stones where at noon on the summer solstice, a narrow shaft of light passes perfectly through a spiral carving. On the winter solstice, two beams frame the spiral. The effect is precise, intentional, and breathtaking. This was built over 1,000 years ago. Around the same time, aliens are theorized to have been active on Earth. But the builders of Chaco Canyon had no written language, no advanced instruments, and yet they tracked celestial events with an accuracy rivaling modern observatories. The Navajo, Hopi, and Zuni, who trace cultural connections to the ancestral Puebloans, say that their ancestors were visited by star people. In these stories, the star people were not gods but visitors, teachers who came from above, bringing knowledge and sometimes warnings. Could the Sun Dagger be not just a calendar, but a message from those who taught the ancient people? The Great Serpent Mound in southern Ohio, winding across a plateau, lies one of the strangest monuments in America, the Great Serpent Mound. It is an enormous earthwork, more than 300 feet long, shaped like a serpent with a coiled tail. At its head is an oval shape, often interpreted as an egg or a sun. But here is the shocking detail. The Serpent Mound is aligned with astronomical events, including the summer solstice sunset and the winter solstice sunrise. The Adena culture is credited with its construction, but carbon dating suggests multiple periods of building and reconstruction. Possibly around 1070 AD, just over 900 years ago, some researchers have pointed out another chilling coincidence. Around that same year, a supernova lit up the sky. Chinese astronomers recorded it, and its remnant is what we now call the Crab Nebula. Could the Serpent Mound have been built in response to something seen in the sky? A message? A marker? A tribute to beings who came with the star fire? The mound is massive, visible only from above. Who, then, was it meant for? Humans on the ground or visitors from the sky? Hopi legends, the Ant People. Among the Hopi people of Arizona, legends tell of great cycles of destruction and survival. According to their traditions, the world has ended not once, but multiple times, and each time humanity survived with the help of the Ant People. The Ant People are described as humanoid beings who lived underground, emerging to help humans during catastrophes. They taught survival skills, gave food, and sheltered the Hopi until it was safe to return to the surface. But here is the sleepless detail. In Hopi art, the Ant People are sometimes drawn with large, almond-shaped eyes and elongated heads, a description hauntingly close to modern accounts of extraterrestrials, the Greys. Could this legend be more than allegory? Could it be a memory of a time when non-human beings lived alongside early Americans, guiding them through disasters? Zuni and Lakota, the sky beings, the Zuni people of New Mexico tell stories of the Ashkoya, shining beings who descended from the heavens. They are said to have taught the Zuni the secrets of agriculture, just as the Hopi remember being taught survival by the Ant People. The Lakota Sioux, farther north, speak of star nations, tribes not of earth, but of the skies. They describe star People who came to Earth in ships of light, sometimes intermarrying with humans, sometimes guiding them. These stories stretch back centuries, perhaps even 1,300 years or more. They are not told as myths but as traditions, as histories handed down through generations. The mystery of American mounds and earthworks. Across the Midwest and the South, countless mounds and earthworks dot the landscape. Many are simple burial mounds, but others, like Cahokia and the Serpent Mound, align with celestial events in ways that suggest more than chance. Imagine living 1,300 years ago, without telescopes, without satellites, without Google Maps. How would you know how to align a structure perfectly with the path of the sun or the rising of certain stars? The unsettling possibility is that the builders had help. That knowledge was not discovered but given, the sleepless pattern. So, what do we find when we step back? Cahokia, a massive city aligned to the heavens. Chaco Canyon, solar calendars carved into stone with breathtaking precision. Serpent Mound, a cosmic marker, perhaps linked to a supernova. Hopi legends, beings who look eerily like modern aliens, helping humanity survive. Zuni and Lakota, traditions of star beings guiding their ancestors. Together, these fragments form a disturbing mosaic. America was not a silent wilderness 1,300 years ago. It was alive with cultures, cities, monuments, and stories of contact. If aliens were here, they were not distant. They were present. They walked alongside the ancestors of today's native peoples. They left their marks in the land, in the legends, and in the alignments of structures still standing today. The unasked question. And now we arrive at the question no one likes to ask. If extraterrestrials were visiting America 1,300 years ago, where are they now? Did they leave, promising to return? Did they retreat underground like the Hopi ant people, still watching from below? Or are they still here, hidden in the deserts, the forests, and the mountains, waiting for the right time to reveal themselves? Again, it is a thought that lingers in the mind, unsettling and sleepless, because if the legends are true, if the alignments are intentional, then the story of aliens in America is not just history, it is an ongoing presence. The artifacts that shouldn't exist, history as we are taught, is a straight line. We imagine humans slowly evolving, step by step, from primitive tools to modern technology. But scattered across the world are objects, strange artifacts, that do not fit into that line. They are the out-of-place objects, discoveries that whisper of forgotten knowledge, or outside intervention. Were these anomalies created by humans alone, or do they point to encounters with alien visitors around the very period we are exploring, 1,300 years ago and beyond? The Baghdad Battery in 1938, archaeologists excavating near Baghdad discovered something shocking, a clay jar containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod. At first glance, it looked ordinary. But when reconstructed, it functioned as a primitive battery, capable of generating an electrical charge. How old was it? Some estimates place it around 250 BC, others closer to 600-800 AD. Either way, it predates our modern understanding of electricity by over 1,000 years. So the question becomes, what was it used for? Were ancient people experimenting with electroplating medical treatments or something else entirely? And here's the sleepless thought. Did humans invent this on their own, or was it a gift, a fragment of alien technology passed down to early civilizations? The crystal skulls across Central America. Several crystal skulls have been discovered, carved from single blocks of quartz, with precision that defies explanation. The most famous, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, is carved against the grain of the crystal, something modern diamond-tipped tools would struggle to replicate without shattering. Legend claims the skulls hold knowledge from the gods, or even serve As communication devices with beings from the stars, mainstream archaeologists dismiss them as modern fakes. Yet indigenous traditions insist they are ancient, possibly over 1,000 years old, placing them directly in the timeline of alien contact 1,300 years ago. What if the skulls are not just artifacts, but remnants of technology misunderstood and mythologized over time? The Piri Reis map in 1929, a strange map was discovered in Istanbul, drawn by the Ottoman admiral Piri Reis in 1513. The map clearly depicts parts of South America, centuries before Europeans had fully explored it. Even more shocking, it shows the coast of Antarctica, drawn not as it is today under ice, but as it would have looked ice-free thousands of years ago. How could Piri Reis have drawn this? He claimed his map was based on older sources. But who made those sources? Some theorists argue that the original data for the map must have come from a civilization with advanced surveying ability, or from extraterrestrials who had flown over Earth and mapped it from above. And if that knowledge survived into the 1500s, how far back did it go? Good alien visitors around 700 to 800 AD have been sharing fragments of this same cartographic wisdom. The stone spheres of Costa Rica scattered across the jungles of Costa Rica are hundreds of massive stone spheres, some weighing up to 15 tons. They are nearly perfect in shape, crafted with uncanny precision. Dating suggests they were carved between 600 and 1000 AD, exactly in the period we're exploring. Why were they made? No one knows. Some were placed in patterns that align with constellations, others seem randomly scattered. Were they symbols of power, markers of territory, or signals for beings who could view them from above? Imagine standing in the jungle 1,300 years ago, carving giant spheres that could only be fully appreciated from the sky. Who was watching? The long heads of Peru in the region of Paracas, Peru, archaeologists uncovered skulls with extreme elongation, far beyond what could be achieved by cultural headbinding. These Paracas skulls, some dating close to 1,000 years ago, have larger cranial volumes and different suture patterns than normal human skulls. Genetic testing has revealed anomalies, DNA markers not commonly found in the region. To believers in ancient aliens, the Paracas skulls are evidence of hybrid beings, offspring of humans and extraterrestrials, living on Earth at the very time we are discussing. To skeptics, they are simply rare genetic variations. But if you could stand face to face with one of these individuals 1,300 years ago, would you not feel you were meeting something not entirely human? The Nazca lines. Again, but deeper we touched. Briefly on the Nazca lines earlier, but let us return, because the timeline matters. By 700, 800 AD, the Nazca culture was fading, but the lines remained. Some researchers suggest they were reused by later peoples, who saw them not just as sacred, but as markers of an older alien presence. Recent aerial studies have revealed new figures, animals, humanoids, and shapes that look eerily like modern runways. If the lines were meant for gods, why make them so enormous, visible only from the air? Unless, of course, the gods were never gods at all, but visitors in flying craft, visitors who may have returned again and again. The Voynich manuscript, kept in Yale University today, is one of the most mysterious books ever discovered, the Voynich manuscript. Carbon dating places it around the early 1400s, but many scholars argue that its strange script and illustrations could be based on far older sources. Its pages are filled with unknown plants, star charts, and bizarre diagrams that seem otherworldly. The text is written in a language no one has ever been able to decode. Could the manuscript be a record of alien knowledge, passed down through secret traditions, surviving in fragments until it was finally written down? If so, the seeds of that knowledge may have been planted around the very centuries we are exploring, when visitors walked among us. The global puzzle. When we place all these anomalies together, a disturbing picture emerges. A battery that predates electricity. Crystal skulls carved with precision beyond modern tools. Maps showing the Earth as if seen from space. Stone spheres that could only be appreciated from above. Skulls that seem not entirely human. Books no one can read. These are not the inventions of imagination. They are real, physical objects, and they seem to cluster around the periods when humanity was making great leaps forward, when alien visitors perhaps were nudging us along. Defy. Sleepless thought, here is the thought that lingers. What if these artifacts are not random? What if they are breadcrumbs? Traces of a larger story, evidence left behind by visitors who did not just observe humanity, but guided us, shaping our growth step by step. And if they did so in the past, if they left artifacts scattered like puzzles across the world, then perhaps they wanted us to find them. Perhaps the story is not finished. When you look at a photograph of the Paracas skulls, or stand before the Serpent Mound, or gaze at the Nazca lines from above, remember, you are not just looking at history. You may be looking at proof that we are not alone and never have been. Visitors in the medieval and colonial skies up until now, we've looked at ancient civilizations, mysterious artifacts, and Native American traditions that whisper of alien contact. But the story does not end in the distant past. As centuries rolled forward, humans continued to look to the skies, and the skies continued to answer back. From the monasteries of medieval Europe to the early towns of colonial America, reports of strange visitors did not fade. Instead, they grew louder, more detailed, and harder to dismiss, the celestial battles of medieval Europe. Let's begin in the Middle Ages, a time often imagined as cloaked in superstition. Yet some of the strangest and most specific alien encounters in history come from this period. In Nuremberg, 1561, townspeople awoke to a sky filled with glowing orbs, cylindrical objects, and crosses of light. Witnesses swore they saw the objects clashing in combat, discharging beams of energy. When the battle ended, some of the objects appeared to fall to earth, vanishing in clouds of smoke. A woodcut from the time depicts the event vividly, shapes in the sky that look eerily like modern reports of UFOs. Only a few years later, in Basel, Switzerland, 1566, a similar phenomenon occurred. This time, citizens described black globes darting across the sky, again seeming to battle one another. Chroniclers described the scene as terrifying and wondrous. Could these have been visitors clashing over Earth, their battles spilling into our skies? If so, the Middle Ages may not have been a quiet chapter in history at all, but a theater of cosmic conflict. The angel hair phenomenon in Rome, 1461. Chroniclers recorded a dazzling sight. A great star moving slowly across the sky, followed by smaller glowing orbs. What made the event chilling was what fell from the heavens, thin, silky threads, sometimes called angel hair. Witnesses described the substance as floating down, clinging to clothes and rooftops before dissolving when touched. Modern UFO reports describe the exact same phenomenon. In 1954, in Florence, Italy, soccer players and thousands of fans witnessed glowing objects in the sky. Again, angel hair rained down, tested by scientists and found to contain unusual elements. If angel hair appeared in both 15th century Rome and 20th century Italy, then this is not folklore. It is a phenomenon linked to real, physical craft that may have been here for centuries. The Irish monastery encounter in 740 AD, monks in Ireland described a chilling event. During evening prayers, they saw what they thought was a ship sailing across the sky. The ship lowered an anchor, which caught on the doorway of the monastery. A figure descended, moving as if swimming through air, but the being seemed unable to breathe in Earth's atmosphere, gasping for air before retreating back up the rope. The ship then departed into the clouds. This account reads less like a miracle and more like a technological encounter. A ship, an anchor, a struggling being. If true, then visitors were not just observing, they were interacting, sometimes clumsily, with the human world. Colonial America, the first UFOs. When Europeans arrived in the New World, they brought not only weapons and ships, but also written language. And soon, they too began recording encounters with strange visitors. In 1639, Governor John Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony wrote in his journal about a strange light seen over the Charles River. Several men in a boat watched as a glowing object darted back and forth across the sky for hours, moving against the wind. At one point, the men reported that their boat had been carried swiftly downstream without explanation, as if pulled by the object itself. Just 4 years later, in 1644, another strange sighting was recorded. Lights appearing in the sky above Boston, described as darting rapidly and sometimes forming into the figure of a man. These are among the earliest written UFO reports in American history, and they happened long before airplanes, satellites, or rockets could be mistaken for such phenomena. The New Haven encounter in 1647 in New Haven, Connecticut, dozens of people reported seeing a great vessel in the air. Witnesses described a large ship-shaped object, complete with sails and rigging, moving silently above the harbor before fading into the clouds. To the colonists, it was interpreted as an omen, a ghostly vision. But read with modern eyes, it is shockingly direct. A description of a craft in the sky witnessed by an entire community. The Hudson Valley Lights, moving forward in time, we find another American mystery, one that spanned centuries. In New York's Hudson Valley, long before the famous UFO wave of the 1980s, native peoples told of flying canoe spirits and strange lights over the river. Early settlers, too, recorded sightings of glowing orbs moving in formation. If the same valley hosted UFO sightings in the 1600s, the 1800s, and the 1980s, then perhaps these are not isolated incidents. Perhaps the Hudson Valley is, and has always been, a corridor of contact. The petroglyphs of Nevada, even older than colonial encounters, are the petroglyphs carved into Nevada stone, dating back over 10,000 years. Some of these carvings, however, appear eerily like modern depictions of UFOs, saucer shapes, beams of light, and humanoid figures with large round heads. By 700–800 AD, the ancestors of tribes in the region were still carving symbols, continuing traditions passed down for generations. Could they have been recording ongoing visitations, sightings that spanned millennia? The Kentucky Goblins, though more recent, one American case seems to echo much older traditions. In 1955, in Kelly, Kentucky, a family reported being besieged by small, glowing-eyed creatures around their farmhouse. The beings, described as about 3 feet tall, with long arms and glowing eyes, approached again and again, retreating only when shot at. To many, it sounds absurd. But when compared to native traditions of the little people, mischievous, otherworldly beings, said to emerge from caves and the earth, it resonates. Could the Kelly incident be a modern echo of encounters that have been happening for over 1,000 years? The overarching pattern step back, and the timeline becomes deeply unsettling. 740 AD, Irish monks see a ship in the sky. 1461 AD, angel hair falls over Rome. 1561, 1566, sky battles rage over Europe. 1639, 1647, colonists in Massachusetts and Connecticut record UFOs. Ancient petroglyphs, Nevada stones depict sources and beings. 1955, Kelly, Kentucky, besieged by otherworldly creatures. Different centuries, different cultures, the same motifs, ships in the sky, glowing orbs, beings that are not human. If these were all hallucinations, why do they echo so perfectly across centuries? If they were all natural phenomena, Why do witnesses describe technology? Anchors, ropes, ship sails, metallic hulls. The simplest and most sleepless explanation is this. The same visitors have been here all along. They did not vanish after 700 or 800 AD. They continued to appear generation after generation, adapting to each new era, but always leaving traces behind. Why here? Why then? This leads us to the great unanswered question, why Earth, and why during this period of history? One possibility is that humanity was reaching a turning point around 1300 years ago. Civilizations were rising, knowledge was expanding, and cultures were building monuments aligned with the stars. Perhaps aliens saw this as the moment to intervene or to monitor. Another possibility is darker. Perhaps Earth has always been a site of interest, not for what we are, but for what we represent. A fertile world, rich in resources, poised on the edge of civilization, a planet worth watching or worth claiming. The sleepless thought so. Tonight, as you lie awake, remember this. When Governor John Winthrop looked up from the Charles River in 1639, he saw lights moving with intelligence. When Irish monks saw a ship lower its anchor, they wrote it down not as legend, but as fact. When colonists in New Haven saw a vessel in the sky, they described it with the language they knew, sails, masts, rigging. But what if all of them, monks, colonists, townsfolk, were witnessing the same thing, the same visitors who walked with the Maya, who guided the Hopi, who watched over Cahokia? What if 1300 years ago was not just the past, but the beginning of an ongoing presence? And what if, even now, they are still here, waiting for us to finally notice? Faces of the visitors. For centuries, humanity has asked the same question. If aliens came to Earth, what did they look like? It is tempting to think this is a modern question, born from science fiction films and abduction reports. Yet descriptions of the visitors are not new. Across cultures from 1300 years ago and earlier, people described beings with shapes and features that did not belong to any human. And when those descriptions are compared across the world, separated by oceans and centuries, something chilling happens. The patterns match. The grey archetype in ancient times, today, when people claim to encounter aliens, they often describe the same form: small beings with slender bodies, large heads, and enormous black almond-shaped eyes. The so-called greys, skeptics, say this archetype is the product of modern culture. Yet Native American stories of the ant people, Hopi legends of underground helpers, and Zuni myths of shining star beings all describe visitors with large heads and large eyes. In Africa, the Dogon people spoke of beings from Sirius who were slender with large heads. In medieval Europe, texts describe moon men or star visitors who were child-sized and pale. What are the chances that cultures separated by continents and centuries all imagined the same thing? Unless, of course, they weren't imagining. The tall ones. Not all descriptions are of small beings. Some traditions speak of towering figures, beings described as tall, luminous, sometimes even glowing. In Norse mythology, around the very period we are examining, there are references to the Ulfa, shining beings who descended from the sky. In Native American traditions, some tribes speak of sky people, who were tall and radiant, unlike any human. In Mesoamerican art, murals show tall figures with elongated skulls, guiding humans in rituals. Modern UFO encounters also include reports of tall Nordics, alien beings described as human-like, but taller, with unnaturally bright eyes and a sense of authority. Could these accounts be linked across time? The shapeshifters and tricksters, other stories are stranger still. Some native legends describe beings who could change their form, appearing human, animal, or otherworldly, depending on the situation. The Lakota spoke of star people who walked among them in disguise. The Cherokee told of visitors who lived on mountaintops, appearing sometimes as humans, sometimes as lights in the sky. If aliens were here 1300 years ago, perhaps they were not always obvious. Perhaps they moved among humans, blending in when they chose, hiding their true form. Modern abduction cases also speak of this. Aliens projecting illusions into human minds, appearing as familiar figures before revealing their true form. Could this ability explain why their presence has always been hidden in plain sight? The hybrid theory. One of the most disturbing threads in alien encounters is the idea of hybrids, offspring of humans and extraterrestrials. The elongated skulls of paracas, Peru, are one possible clue, but the idea appears in myths worldwide. The Hopi spoke of unions between star people and humans. The Dogon of Africa said the visitors shared blood with them. Even in medieval Europe, stories of changelings, children who did not look like their parents with unusual features, echo this fear. Modern abduction reports often describe aliens collecting genetic material, sometimes even showing abductees hybrid children. Could this have been happening not just in the modern era, but 1300 years ago as well? If so, then some among us today might carry traces of alien lineage, unknowing descendants of unions that began long ago. Behavioral patterns of the visitors across all encounters, ancient, medieval, and modern. Alien behavior seems to follow certain patterns. Observation. Many reports describe aliens simply watching, appearing in the sky, hovering, recording, but not interfering. Guidance. In some cases they share knowledge, astronomy, agriculture, calendars, survival. Interference. Other stories suggest they influence battles, guide rulers, or rescue specific groups. Experimentation. The most unsettling pattern. Taking humans, studying them, perhaps altering them. If we look at 1300 years ago, all of these behaviors appear. Star beings guiding native peoples, ships in the skies above European battles, strange beings struggling to breathe Earth's air, suggesting not gods but physical visitors. The consistency across time suggests a long-term program. Aliens not as random visitors, but as deliberate actors in human history. Why Earth? Why then? Why? Would aliens come here 1300 years ago? One possibility is simple. Earth has always been valuable. Its water, its atmosphere, its diversity of life. Perhaps alien visitors are scientists studying a living laboratory. Another possibility is more intimate. Perhaps Earth is not just being studied but shaped. If aliens have guided human civilization, teaching the Maya astronomy, inspiring Cahokia's alignments, helping the Hopi survive disasters, then we are part of their project. And then there is the darkest possibility, that humanity itself was engineered, that our DNA carries their fingerprints, that 1300 years ago was not a first contact, but one of many check-ins with their creation. Contact accounts, sleepless details. Let's revisit some accounts, this time focusing on what they tell us about the aliens themselves. The Irish monks, 740 AD. A ship lowers an anchor and a being descends. The being struggles to breathe. This is not a god. It is a physical entity, vulnerable to Earth's environment. Baghdad, 750 AD. Chronicles describe shining domes above the city. The descriptions emphasize metallic appearance, technology, not spirit. Hopi ant people. Large heads, large eyes, underground dwellers. If these are greys, then their story stretches back centuries. Zuni Ashkoya, shining beings who teach agriculture. This suggests intention, purpose, not random visitation, peace. By peace, a picture forms, not one of mystical gods, but of physical beings, sometimes helpful, sometimes frightening, always other. Modern echoes of ancient encounters. If aliens were present 1300 years ago, then modern encounters should resemble them. And they do. Abductees. Today describe greys with large eyes, matching Hopi and Dogon traditions. Contactees in the 20th century spoke of tall, luminous beings, matching Norse and native accounts. Modern UFO sightings involve glowing disks and domes, matching medieval flaming shields and shining domes. The continuity is undeniable. The same beings appear again and again, wearing different masks, interpreted through different cultures, but they are the same, the sleepless thought. Here is the thought that unsettles the heart. What if the aliens never left? What if the same Greys who taught the Hopi survive today, still watching from underground bases? What if the same tall, shining beings who guided ancient rituals still walk among us, disguised as humans? What if 1300 years ago was not a rare moment of contact, but simply one chapter in a story that continues even now? When you stand under the night sky, you may think of it as distant, unreachable, but perhaps it is closer than you know. Perhaps the visitors who once stepped onto our soil are still here, watching, waiting, and perhaps the face you see in your dreams, the one with large black eyes, or the one taller and brighter than any human, has been with us for centuries. The sky was never empty. We often believe that UFO sightings began in the 20th century, the flashing lights of Roswell, the mysterious disks of the Cold War. But history tells a different story. For as long as humans have raised their eyes to the sky, they have reported strange ships, glowing lights, and visitors from beyond. And some of the most chilling accounts come not from the modern world, but from the Middle Ages. Let us journey through time, through chronicles written by monks, sailors, scholars, and kings, and uncover the truth. The skies were never empty. The ships in the sky, Ireland, 740 AD. One of the earliest medieval UFO stories comes from Ireland around 740 AD. A group of monks recorded seeing ships sailing through the clouds. One such ship even lowered an anchor, which caught on a church steeple. A sailor descended, described as human-like but gasping for air, unable to breathe properly in Earth's atmosphere. The monks freed the anchor, and the ship sailed away into the heavens. Think about that. 1,000 years before airplanes, before hot air balloons, men of faith were describing spaceships, and crucially, they described the being not as a spirit, but as a physical traveler, struggling in our air. The battle over Nuremberg, 1561. On April 14, 1561, citizens of Nuremberg, Germany, woke to a terrifying sight. The sky was filled with strange objects, crosses, globes, cylinders, and discs. Witnesses reported that the objects engaged in battle, shooting beams of light at one another. Some were destroyed, others fell to earth. The entire event was documented in a broadsheet by Hans Glaser, complete with illustrations. He described it as a dreadful apparition, frightening all who saw it. Was this just a celestial event misinterpreted? Or was it exactly what it appeared to be? An aerial battle between alien craft, witnessed by hundreds of people? If true, it suggests aliens were not merely visiting, but fighting above our very heads. Basel's fiery orbs, 1566. Only 5 years later, in Basel, Switzerland, citizens witnessed something similar. On August 7th, the sky filled with black spheres moving at incredible speeds. They seemed to chase each other, crashing and bursting into fiery light. The chronicler Samuel Coccus described the event as a battle between heavenly forces. But when you read his words today, it sounds eerily like UFO warfare. Why were alien ships fighting in the skies above Europe? Were they warring factions, or were some defending humanity while others threatened it? Shields in the sky, medieval Europe. Throughout medieval chronicles, strange aerial phenomena were often described as shields or fiery wheels. In 776 AD, at the siege of Sigisburg in France, Saxon attackers surrounded a Christian fortress. Suddenly, 2 large glowing shields appeared in the sky. Terrified, the Saxons fled, believing divine forces protected their enemies. Were these shields divine? Or were they craft? Alien ships intervening in human conflict. The description matches countless later UFO reports, glowing, disc-like, hovering silently, radiating power. The Aurora of Japan, 1180 AD 1180. Japanese records describe a strange, luminous object that appeared in the night sky over the province of Kii. It moved slowly, glowing like a torch, but remained suspended for hours. Locals called it a heavenly portent. For a medieval farmer, it was an omen, but for us, it is a precise description of a hovering UFO, something with technology far beyond torches or lanterns. The Green Children of Woolpit, 12th century. England, one of the strangest accounts from medieval England, tells of two children found near the village of Woolpit in Suffolk. They had green-tinted skin, spoke an unknown language, and wore unfamiliar clothing. When they learned English, they claimed to come from a place called the Land of St. Martin, a twilight world underground. Some historians call it folklore. But what if it was not? What if the children were survivors of an alien presence, hybrids, or visitors who lost their way? Their description of a twilight world echoes modern theories of underground alien bases hidden deep within Earth. The Flaming Cross of Constantinople, 9th century and 840 AD. Citizens of Constantinople reported a massive cross of light in the sky, glowing for hours above the city. The event was so awe-inspiring that Emperor Louis the Pious ordered prayers of thanksgiving. But was it a cross, or was it how medieval eyes described a gigantic luminous craft? The length, the brightness, the sustained hovering, all details. Echo modern UFO sightings, lights over Florence, 1608. In October 1608, residents of Basel, Strasbourg, and Florence reported enormous aerial ships. Chroniclers described flaming globes and ships full of men maneuvering in the sky. Witnesses claimed they saw these crafts land, emitting beams of light before vanishing back into the clouds. How could people in 1608 describe such scenes unless they had truly seen something far beyond their time? The visitors were always here. When we gather these stories, spread across continents and centuries, a terrifying pattern emerges. Ireland, 740 AD, ships with anchors. France, 776 AD, glowing shields intervene in battle. Japan, 1180 AD, a hovering, glowing torch. England, 1100s. Children from a twilight land. Germany and Switzerland, 1500s. Full-scale aerial battles. Italy, 1600s. Ships landing, beams of light. These are not random. They are consistent sightings of alien craft, described through the language of the times. The implication: aliens did not come once, or occasionally. They were here, century after century, visible to anyone who dared look up. Why were they seen so often then? Why do medieval chronicles contain so many reports of aliens, while today encounters are more hidden? One theory is that humanity's skies were empty then. No planes, no satellites, no pollution. A strange light in the sky was unmistakable. People noticed. People recorded. Another theory is darker. Perhaps in those centuries, alien presence was more active. Wars fought above us, interventions in battles, genetic experiments among human populations. And perhaps once their work was complete, they receded into the shadows, watching us more quietly. The sleepless thought. Here is the thought that keeps many awake at night. If aliens were so visible in the past, seen in daylight, recorded by scholars, feared by armies, then where are they now? The truth may be unsettling. They may not have gone anywhere. They may simply have perfected their ability to hide. Cloaking, underground bases, abductions in the night instead of public displays. The medieval witnesses saw what they were meant to see: proof, hints, glimpses. Enough to shape culture, faith, and fear, and perhaps even now, when you look at the quiet night sky, ships may still be above you, not gone, just invisible. The New World lights. When the first settlers crossed the Atlantic and built their fragile colonies on the edge of an unknown continent, they thought their greatest dangers would come from starvation, disease, or conflict with neighboring tribes. What they did not expect was to look up into the New World skies and see that they were not alone. Colonial America may have been a land of fresh soil and uncharted forests, but the heavens above were just as mysterious as the ground beneath. Their feet, strange lights, unexplained movements, and encounters that defied all natural law haunted the records of the 1600s and 1700s. It is tempting to believe that aliens only arrived in modern times, but the truth is that the first chapters of American history are shadowed by visitors who revealed themselves, briefly and brilliantly, before vanishing again into the night. One of the earliest and most startling accounts comes from the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1639. Governor John Winthrop, one of the most respected men of his time, recorded in his journal an event that shook the small Puritan settlement. He wrote of a group of men gathered near the Charles River, who witnessed a strange light in the sky. The light appeared as a bright object darting back and forth with astonishing speed. The men rowed their small boat across the water, but the glowing craft followed them, weaving above the river as if studying their movements. The encounter lasted for hours, long enough to rule out meteors or comets. When the light finally disappeared, the stunned men discovered something even stranger. Though they had been rowing for hours, they had returned to the very spot where they began, as if time and space had shifted around them. Winthrop recorded the incident soberly, without embellishment, as though it were just another piece of business. Yet hidden between the lines is a story of missing time, disorientation, and a craft that behaved like no natural phenomenon. 4. Those who know the modern patterns of alien abduction reports, the parallels are chilling. The native peoples of America had long spoken of star beings, visitors who came from the sky. For them, the glowing lights were not new. They were part of oral traditions stretching back generations. The Hopi spoke of the Kachinas, spirits who came from the heavens and taught them knowledge. The Zuni told of the sky people who walked among them in ancient times. The Cherokee spoke of beings from the stars who could pass through worlds and return at will. To the tribes, these were not fairy tales. They were warnings and teachings, preserved carefully so that each generation would remember that humanity was not alone. When settlers arrived and began to see similar lights in the sky, the native stories suddenly carried new weight. But instead of recognizing the shared truth, settlers often dismissed these accounts as superstition, just as skeptics still do today. As the colonies grew, reports of luminous objects continued. In the 1640s, strange lights were recorded in New Haven, Connecticut. A great light was seen rising out of the sea and traveling across the sky before disappearing into the clouds. The entire town witnessed it, and ministers noted it as an omen. In 1663, in Robo-Zero, a remote Russian town but widely reported in European journals, villagers saw a massive fiery ball hover above a lake, illuminating the entire landscape with daylight brightness. Colonial Americans read such reports in European pamphlets and saw a pattern. Whatever was happening in Europe was also happening in the New World. For them, it was impossible to escape the suspicion that something watched from above, both here and abroad. By the early 1700s, with settlements stretching further inland, the sightings became even more unsettling. Farmers in Pennsylvania told of glowing orbs that hovered above their fields at night, frightening livestock and leaving patches of scorched earth. In Virginia, a minister recorded a burning globe that hung in the sky for nearly half an hour, brighter than the moon. Sailors along the eastern seaboard spoke of lights that followed their ships for nights on end, changing color from white to red to green. These lights were not lanterns, nor were they stars. They moved intelligently, responding to the movements of the ships below. Perhaps the most disturbing reports came from the frontier, where isolation magnified the terror of the unknown. Settlers in the Appalachians told of glowing carriages that hovered silently above forests, lights shining down like lanterns scanning the trees. Some claimed to hear a low humming sound, like a distant swarm of bees when the objects approached. Stories circulated of hunters who vanished without trace after reporting strange lights in the woods. Entire families whispered that beings not of this earth were taking people, studying them, and returning them changed or not at all. While modern ears might dismiss such stories as folklore, they align perfectly with patterns still reported in abduction cases today. By the time of the American Revolution, the skies themselves seemed to join the chaos of war. Soldiers in both armies wrote of mysterious lights that hovered silently above battlefields. At times, they were interpreted as omens of victory or disaster. At other times, they were ignored, dismissed as tricks of the eye. But journals remain, handwritten. Words of men hardened by war, who admitted to seeing fiery globes and great shining wheels, turning silently above the smoke of muskets. Was it coincidence that in moments when America's future hung in the balance, the watchers in the sky appeared more frequently? Or were they observing, perhaps even influencing, the course of history? After independence, the sightings did not stop. In fact, they grew bolder. Reports from the early 1800s tell of cigar-shaped craft hovering over towns, witnessed by dozens at a time. In 1801, residents of Hull, England, reported a massive glowing object, and American newspapers reprinted the story with fascination, connecting it to their own sightings along the coasts. By 1811, during the Great Comet's appearance, witnesses in multiple American states claimed to see not just the comet, but secondary objects, moving lights that seemed to dance around it, behaving independently. Was it possible that an actual craft used the comet's presence to disguise its movements, watching from the shadows of a celestial event? The deeper America expanded, the more frequently pioneers spoke of strange visitations. The wide skies of the Midwest became a stage for glowing orbs, silent disks, and lights that moved against the wind. Native tribes continued to tell their stories of star people, and settlers began to quietly admit that they too had seen the visitors. By the time the 19th century reached its middle, the phrase "mystery airship" began to appear in newspapers. But those tales belong to a later part of this story. For now, what matters is clear. From the very first pages of American history, the skies have whispered a truth too large to ignore. And yet, perhaps the most sleepless detail is this. The settlers who saw lights in the 1600s, the soldiers who saw globes in the 1700s, and the farmers who saw discs in the early 1800s, they all looked up at the same skies that hang above us tonight. The visitors they described are the same shapes, the same movements, the same phenomena that we still see. Centuries have passed, technology has changed, but the pattern has not. It is as though Earth is part of a larger map, a location marked long ago, watched endlessly, visited regularly. Our ancestors did not know the word alien. They did not imagine space travel. Yet they recorded, with trembling honesty, the very encounters we still struggle to explain today. The truth, hidden in plain sight, is that America's story has always been entangled with the unknown. The colonies were never truly isolated, never beyond reach. From the very beginning, someone or something was watching from the heavens, and if they watched then, they are watching still. The mystery airships of 19th century America, a new century, a new fear. By the late 1800s, America was entering a period of transformation. Railroads crisscrossed the nation, telegraphs connected distant towns, and industry was booming. The skies, however, remained the great frontier, empty, mysterious, and unreachable. At least they were supposed to be. Between 1896 and 1897, something extraordinary happened. Across dozens of states, thousands of Americans reported seeing strange airships floating through the night skies. These were not comets, meteors, or balloons. Witnesses described massive, cigar-shaped craft with powerful searchlights, metallic surfaces, and, most unsettling of all, strange beings who sometimes descended and interacted with humans. It was the largest wave of UFO sightings in America before the modern era, and the consistency of the reports leaves us with one inescapable question. Had the watchers finally revealed themselves? The first sightings, Sacramento, 1896. The wave began in California in November of 1896. Newspapers in Sacramento reported a mysterious flying machine seen at night, moving silently across the sky. Witnesses described a long, cigar-shaped body with a bright light at its front. Hundreds of people crowded into the streets to watch it pass overhead. What startled them most was its speed and control. Balloons of the time could drift slowly, but this object changed direction abruptly, even against the wind. Its light pulsed as though powered by some unknown energy source. Over the next days, similar reports spread through Northern California. The object was seen in Oakland, San Francisco, and as far as Santa Rosa. Each time, descriptions matched. A massive craft, glowing brightly, sailing silently across the night sky. Spreading eastward, 1897, by early 1897, the sightings moved eastward. From Texas to Kansas, from Illinois to Iowa, newspapers filled with headlines about mysterious airships. Reports often came from farmers, railroad workers, lawmen, and entire town gatherings, people who had no reason to invent such tales. One Kansas farmer described an object as large as a battleship, gliding silently overhead. Others claimed to see moving propellers and wings, perhaps the only way they could describe alien technology with their limited vocabulary. In some towns, the airships even landed. Witnesses approached them and reported speaking with strange men who wore unusual clothing, sometimes metallic suits, and who claimed to be testing new flying machines. But here lies the unsettling detail. In 1897, no human technology existed that could explain such machines. The Wright brothers' first flight was still 6 years away. Humanity was grounded, yet the skies were full of ships. The Aurora incident, Texas, 1897. Among the most famous reports was the Aurora incident in Texas, April 1897. According to local newspapers, a strange craft crashed into a windmill on a farmer's property. When townsfolk rushed to the scene, they found wreckage of an unknown material, lightweight and metallic, unlike anything they had seen. More shockingly, they found a body. Described as not of this earth, the being was small, humanoid, and badly disfigured by the crash. Locals buried the body in the town cemetery, and the event became legend. Skeptics dismissed it as a hoax, but decades later, researchers discovered an old headstone in the Aurora Cemetery, marked only with a crude symbol resembling a spacecraft. Ground-penetrating radar even suggested an unmarked grave still lies beneath the soil. Whether or not the full story is true, the consistency of the details, wreckage, non-human body, a crash site, makes Aurora eerily similar to Roswell, half a century later. Encounters with the occupants. Many airship reports didn't stop at lights in the sky. Witnesses described face-to-face encounters with the beings inside. In one case from Missouri, a farmer reported that a large airship landed in his field. Strange men approached him, speaking in a language he could not recognize. They asked for water, and tinkered with odd devices on the craft before departing. Another report from Texas described a group of townspeople who encountered tall, pale-skinned figures repairing a landed ship. When questioned, the beings spoke perfect English, claiming to be travelers from a distant land, but their clothes and tools did not resemble anything from the 19th century. Were these beings disguising their origin to avoid fear, or were they part of a long-standing strategy, blending into human society just enough to plant confusion? The silence of the authorities. Despite thousands of reports, government authorities of the time remained strangely silent. Some local officials acknowledged the sightings, but offered no explanation. Others dismissed them as hysteria or imagination. But the sheer volume of accounts, often from respected citizens, made it impossible to ignore. Why did the government stay quiet? One possibility is that they knew more than they admitted. Could they have already been aware of alien visitors, choosing to hide the truth until technology caught up? Or was it simply that the events were so far beyond comprehension? That silence was the easiest response. Patterns that still haunt us. What makes the airship wave of 1896-97 most disturbing is how closely it mirrors modern UFO encounters. Cigar-shaped craft, reported then, still seen today. Bright searchlights resembling modern descriptions of beams or tractor lights. Erratic movements against the wind with sudden turns and stops. Encounters with humanoid beings, some speaking English, others unrecognizable. Crash sites with strange materials, eerily similar to Roswell in 1947. It is as though the same visitors have been here all along, changing only how much they reveal depending on the era. The sleepless realization. When we think of UFOs in America, our minds jump to Roswell or modern military reports, but the truth is far older, far deeper. In the 1890s, long before jets, satellites or radar, our ancestors were already looking up in fear and wonder at glowing ships in the night sky. For your audience today, the realization is both humbling and terrifying. Our great-grandparents lived through a wave of alien encounters that were just as real and just as mysterious as those we struggle with now. The past was never free of watchers. The skies were never empty. If they were here then, visible above farms, towns and cities, across America, then they have always been here. And if they have always been here, what are they waiting for? Shadows before Roswell. 1900 to 1945, the quiet before the storms. As the 20th century dawned, the mystery airship wave faded from headlines. Skeptics claimed the sightings of 1896-1897 were hysteria or misunderstandings. But the silence was deceptive. In truth, the sightings did not stop. They merely changed form. Reports continued, but they became quieter, buried in local papers or passed by word of mouth. From 1900 to the 1940s, scattered across America and the wider world, people continued to see glowing discs, cigar-shaped craft, and unexplainable lights. And as human technology advanced, cars, planes, radios, so too did the behavior of the watchers above. It was as though the visitors were adjusting to the new century, staying just far enough ahead of us to remain untouchable. The early 1900s, cigar ships and strange landings in 1909, newspapers in the Midwest reported a wave of phantom airships once again. Just as in the 1890s, they appeared cigar-shaped, glowing and silent. Residents of Iowa and Nebraska described brilliant beams of light sweeping the ground. In some towns, entire groups of witnesses claimed to see figures walking near landed craft before the ships vanished into the night sky. In 1912, an extraordinary case came from New Jersey. A group of fishermen swore they encountered a hovering craft over the Atlantic. They claimed it was silent, metallic, and larger than any vessel they had seen. Beings they described as small men with luminous suits looked down at them before the craft shot upward with impossible speed. The fishermen were ridiculed, but the pattern is clear. Glowing craft, small humanoid occupants, silent propulsion. The Roaring Twenties. Lights over a changing world, the 1920s brought aviation into the public imagination. Charles Lindbergh. Across the Atlantic, airplanes became more common, and with this new familiarity of flight came renewed reports of strange lights that no plane could explain. Pilots began to see them most often. Night flights across America produced accounts of glowing spheres that followed aircraft, weaving between them before darting away. Some aviators admitted they were too frightened to report the incidents for fear of ridicule. Yet privately, they described the same details we still hear today: orbs of light, silent disks, and sudden vanishing movements. It was during this decade that whispers of the Watchers began to grow. People spoke in hushed tones of beings who monitored humanity, waiting for some unknown moment to reveal themselves. The 1930s. Encounters in the Dust Bowl. The 1930s were marked by the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, yet even in times of hardship, the skies gave no relief. Reports came from Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas of glowing craft appearing in dust storms. Farmers described disks hovering low to the ground, shining beams through thick clouds of dust, as though searching for something. In 1933, near Tacoma, Washington, a logger claimed he encountered a landed craft in the woods. According to his account, beings emerged, small, grey-skinned, with large heads and black eyes. They communicated without words, filling his mind with impressions of warning that humanity was breaking the balance. He was so shaken that he refused to speak of it publicly until years later. Skeptics dismissed his story, but in hindsight, it matches abduction encounters from decades later almost perfectly. The 1940s. The war years. Begin when World War II erupted, the alien presence did not vanish. In fact, it intensified. Pilots, on both the Allied and Axis sides, began reporting strange lights in the sky during missions. They were first dismissed as enemy technology, secret planes or experimental weapons. But as reports grew, it became clear neither side controlled these mysterious objects. The Foo Fighters, fire in the skies by 1942, a new term entered the vocabulary of soldiers, Foo Fighters. These were glowing orbs, disks, and fiery spheres that followed military aircraft during combat missions. Pilots described them as orange, red, or white balls of light that seemed to toy with planes, darting ahead, circling around, and vanishing in an instant. They never fired weapons, yet their presence unnerved even the bravest airmen. In the European theater, pilots flying night missions over Germany reported glowing discs pacing their bombers. Some even feared they were guiding enemy anti-aircraft fire. But intelligence reports later confirmed the Germans were seeing them too. Both sides believed the other had invented a new weapon. But after the war, it became clear that the Foo Fighters belonged to neither. One American pilot described it best. They were under intelligent control. They weren't illusions. They weren't enemy weapons. They were something else entirely. The Battle of Los Angeles, 1942, one of the most shocking wartime encounters occurred in February 1942, just months after Pearl Harbor. In Los Angeles, anti-aircraft defenses opened fire on mysterious objects seen in the night sky. Searchlights illuminated glowing shapes above the city, and for hours, cannons roared. Yet, when the smoke cleared, nothing fell from the sky. Thousands of witnesses saw the objects. The military initially claimed it was a false alarm, perhaps balloons or nerves, but photographs remain, showing glowing shapes caught in searchlights. The Battle of Los Angeles stands as one of the most dramatic mass sightings in history, an urban encounter involving both civilians and the military, leaving behind more questions than answers. The sleepless question by the end of world. War II, humanity had unleashed the atomic age. Rockets, radar, and nuclear weapons had arrived. And in parallel, alien sightings grew bolder, more frequent, and more undeniable. The decades leading up to Roswell were not empty, they were filled with warnings. The airships of the 1890s, the glowing discs of the 1930s, the Foo Fighters of the 1940s, all point to one truth: the visitors never left. They adapted, they observed, and they revealed themselves at moments of great human change. The sleepless realization is this: the beings above us seem to appear when humanity reaches a turning point, when our technology, our wars, or our ambitions shift the balance of the earth. They watched us cross oceans, build railroads, and take to the skies. And now, as the 20th century prepared to open the nuclear age, they watched even closer. Roswell was coming. But by the time the crash in New Mexico stunned the world, the watchers had already been with us for centuries. The real question is not when did they arrive. It is, when will they finally reveal why they are here? Roswell and the UFO explosion of the 1950s, the summer of 1947, when the sky fell in New Mexico. In July 1947, something crashed in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico. Rancher Mac Brazel discovered strange debris scattered across his land, metallic, fragments that were impossibly light, some that would bend but snap back into place, others covered with strange markings resembling hieroglyphs. The Roswell Army airfield quickly became involved. At first, a press release stunned the world. The military announced they had recovered a flying disc. Newspapers across America lit up with headlines. But within 24 hours, the story changed. The Army insisted it was a weather balloon. The public was left in confusion, but witnesses, including military personnel, insisted the wreckage was not from any balloon. Some even claimed that bodies had been recovered, small, grey-skinned beings with oversized heads. These whispers spread quietly, too shocking to print at the time. Roswell became the first great UFO mystery of the modern era. And while the government tried to close the book on it, the skies refused to cooperate. The UFO wave of 1947, just weeks before Roswell, in June 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 shiny, disc-like objects flying at incredible speeds near Mount Rainier in Washington. He described them as moving like saucers skipping on water. The press seized on his words, and the term flying saucer was born. Almost overnight, Americans across the country began reporting saucer sightings. From Idaho to Texas, from New Jersey to Oregon, discs filled the skies. It was as though something had awakened. Roswell wasn't an isolated crash. It was the beginning of a flood. 1952, the Washington, D.C. UFO, flap 5 years after Roswell. UFOs made their most dramatic public appearance. In July 1952, Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, was swarmed by strange lights. Radar operators at National Airport tracked unknown objects darting over the White House and the Capitol. Fighter jets scrambled to intercept, but the objects moved faster than anything America had. Civilians on the ground saw glowing orbs hovering above the city. Pilots swore they chased craft that accelerated beyond belief. The Air Force struggled to contain the panic, eventually holding a press conference. To reassure the public, they blamed temperature inversions, a weak explanation that fooled few. The Washington flap proved that the phenomenon was not confined to rural farms or deserts. It could appear above the very heart of American power. And if the government couldn't stop it, who could? Project Blue Book. The official investigation, as sightings exploded, the U.S. Air Force launched official investigations. Project Sign, 1948, became Project Grudge, and eventually Project Blue Book, 1952-1969. Thousands of UFO reports were collected, analyzed, and categorized. Most were dismissed as balloons, stars, or weather phenomena. But hundreds remained unexplained, objects performing maneuvers beyond human technology. Some insiders whispered that the public explanation was only half the truth. Behind closed doors, the military studied the phenomenon seriously, concerned that UFOs might be advanced Soviet technology or something far stranger. Documents from the time revealed deep unease. Analysts admitted the objects were under intelligent control, but they could not determine by whom. If they were alien, then humanity was powerless against them. The rise of contactees, messages from the stars in the 1950s, another phenomenon emerged. Contactees. Ordinary Americans began claiming face-to-face encounters with beings from other worlds. Unlike abduction stories that came later, these early contactees described the visitors as tall, human-like, often with golden hair and benevolent messages. George Adamski, one of the most famous contactees, claimed he met Venusians who warned humanity about nuclear weapons. His photos of saucers, controversial to this day, were published widely. Others told similar tales. The visitors wanted peace, urging humans to avoid self-destruction. Skeptics laughed, but the timing is important. The world had just entered the nuclear age. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were fresh wounds. Could it be that the Watchers, alarmed by humanity's new destructive power, chose this moment to step closer? Alien shadows at military sites by the mid-1950s. UFO sightings clustered around sensitive areas, nuclear bases, missile sites, and test ranges. In some cases, entire military teams reported saucers disabling their weapon systems. One chilling account came from Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Later, in the 1960s, more detailed versions emerged. UFOs hovered near nuclear silos, and at the same moment, multiple missiles went offline. Whether in the 1950s or later, the message was the same. Whoever controlled these craft could neutralize humanity's deadliest weapons at will. The Watchers were not just curious, they were making a point. The cultural explosion, UFOs in American. Life by the late 1950s, UFOs were everywhere in American culture. Newspapers ran stories, Hollywood made flying saucer films, and children looked to the stars with fear and wonder. Yet behind the cultural frenzy was real terror. Ordinary families reported sightings during road trips or nights on the porch. Farmers swore they saw strange craft hovering over fields. Airline pilots logged near collisions with discs. And in some chilling cases, entire cars were stopped on lonely highways by glowing objects, leaving drivers shaken for life. The Watchers were no longer distant myths. They were a presence woven into American life. The sleepless truth by the close of the 1950s, the pattern was undeniable. Roswell proved something had fallen from the sky, something not of human making. Sightings nationwide showed intelligent craft operating freely in American airspace. The Washington, D.C. flap revealed they could challenge even the government's capital. Contactee stories delivered warnings about humanity's future. Military encounters showed control over nuclear technology. The realization is chilling. The Watchers had moved from curiosity to direct presence. They were no longer glimpsed in ancient carvings or frontier skies. They were here now, testing the boundaries of human power. The sleepless question that haunted every witness, every pilot, every general in the 1950s was this: if they can shut down our weapons, hover over our capital, and appear whenever they choose, what is stopping them from taking control? The age of disclosure, abductions, shadows, and the truth. We fear the 1960s, the age of abduction, begins. Until the 1960s, UFO encounters mostly involved lights in the sky, craft in the distance, or alleged face-to-face contactee meetings. But then, a darker theme emerged: abductions. The most famous early case was Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. Driving late at night in New Hampshire, they saw a strange light following their car. Hours later, they realized they couldn't account for missing time. Under hypnosis, Betty and Barney described being taken aboard a craft, examined by beings with large heads and dark eyes. Betty recalled being shown a star map. Years later, astronomers confirmed it resembled the Zeta Reticuli star system. Suddenly, the alien presence was no longer just overhead. It was invasive, personal, intimate. It could reach into ordinary lives and change them forever. The 1970s, warnings in the night. By the 1970s, abduction reports multiplied. Ordinary Americans described waking in the night to see glowing figures at the foot of their beds, or being pulled through walls into waiting craft. Children, farmers, housewives, and businessmen all told similar stories. Tall greys with black eyes, smaller beings acting as assistants, medical procedures that felt more like experiments. Often, abductees returned with strange scars, implants, or memories too vivid to dismiss as dreams. One chilling detail repeated across cases: the aliens showed visions of Earth in peril, oceans dying, forest burning, nuclear fire consuming cities. Was this a warning, or psychological conditioning for something larger? The sleepless fear was this: if they could take us whenever they wished, then humanity was no longer in control of its own destiny. The 1980s, military bases and alien shadows. The 1980s brought one of the most chilling cases of all, the Rendlesham Forest incident in 1980 near a US Air Force base in England. American servicemen reported strange lights in the forest, a landed triangular craft, and direct contact with beings, or perhaps machines, not of this Earth. Radiation readings spiked at the landing site. Witnesses included trained military personnel whose careers should have made them credible. One officer even claimed telepathic contact, receiving binary code sequences that mapped to global coordinates of ancient sites. Meanwhile, abductees increasingly described not just examinations, but hybrid programs, genetic experiments suggesting aliens were mixing human DNA with their own. Women reported pregnancies that later mysteriously vanished. Men spoke of forced extraction of genetic material. The whispers were terrifying. Were the Watchers trying to create a new species? The 1990s, the shadow of secrecy. By the 1990s, UFOs had become part of American pop culture. Television shows, books, and movies fueled fascination, but behind the fiction, the reality deepened. Declassified documents revealed the government had long studied UFOs under secret programs. Leaked footage, whistleblowers, and insider testimonies suggested crashed craft had indeed been recovered. Roswell was no longer a closed case. It was the root of something massive, ongoing, and deeply classified. And yet, for every leak, the truth remained buried. Was it government secrecy? Or were humans themselves being controlled by a force they could not oppose? The 2000s, from taboo to mainstream. In the 2000s, sightings continued, but the world was changing. With smartphones, millions of people could capture strange objects on video. The excuses, weather balloons, Venus, swamp gas, no longer satisfied. Military pilots from the US Navy began releasing footage of tic-tac-shaped craft performing impossible maneuvers, sudden stops, hypersonic speeds, vanishing into the ocean. Unlike past eras, these were not farmers or lone drivers. They were highly trained military professionals, backed by radar and infrared tracking. The Pentagon admitted these encounters were real and unexplained. Suddenly, UFOs weren't just fringe, they were official. The sleepless reality, why they are. Here, looking back across the 12 parts, the pattern is undeniable. Ancient carvings show beings with impossible technology. Medieval chronicles describe glowing wheels and heavenly visitors. 19th century airships foreshadow modern craft. 20th century sightings escalated with war and nuclear weapons. Roswell and the 1950s proved physical craft were recovered. Abductions and hybrids reveal a disturbing biological agenda. Modern Pentagon admissions confirm they are here and they are not ours. The sleepless truth may be this: the Watchers have been here all along, guiding, warning, manipulating. When humanity crosses thresholds, flight, nuclear power, space, they appear, perhaps to protect us, perhaps to control us, perhaps to prepare us for something we cannot yet understand. The final question: control or contact? If the aliens can disable missiles, abduct people at will, and shape human genetics, then humanity's independence is already compromised. And yet, they have not invaded, not conquered. Instead, they observe, test, warn. This raises the most unsettling question of all. Are we being slowly prepared for open contact, step by step across centuries? Or are we already part of an experiment too vast and incomprehensible to resist? The final sleepless realization for every listener is this: the story of aliens on Earth is not in the past. It is unfolding now. When you look up at the night sky, remember, you may not just be gazing at stars. Someone may be looking back, watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, the real disclosure will not come from governments, but from the visitors themselves when they decide the time has come.